Hello. For those of you who follow my channel, you notice that this video is different from the video I normally post. Today I want to talk about coronavirus. The reason I want to talk about it is that for such an important topic, there are a lot of inaccurate and misleading information that's out there. Politicians will tell you something fits their agenda. The news will make everything into a clickbait. I'm a mathematician. I want to tell you the things we can learn from the data behind coronavirus because data doesn't lie. Today I want to talk about two topics. The first is how deadly coronavirus is. The second is that how likely we have the danger of having a massive outbreak in the US. Now let's talk about death rate. In China we have just over 80,000 infections, and out of those infections we have almost 57,000 cases with outcomes. About 5.4% of them led to death, and the rest of them recovered. So as of now, we can say that the death rate is about 5.4%. We do expect this number to continue to trend down because in the early stage of the outbreak, only the people with very severe symptom have been tested and confirmed. People without symptom or people with very mild symptom who recover later were never tested. So the death rate in early stage will be a bit inflated. I'll say that probably this number will trend to the neighborhood of 5% at the end. So 5%, death rate of 5% is a pretty high number. It's much higher than flu, which is way less than 1%. So it's pretty dangerous. However, we're not seeing a 5% death rate across the board. Specifically, the death rate for Hubei province, which is where the outbreak happened, is 6.5%, which, like I said, will trend down a little bit. And the rest of the country, the death rate is around 0.9% as of March the 5th. And there's reason behind this. When the outbreak happened in Hubei, especially in Wuhan, there were so many patients that the hospital cannot handle all of them. A lot of patients, they die while waiting for bed from the hospital, which led to a higher death rate because many of them were never treated. But for the rest of the country, the death rate is much lower because they have access to the hospital. I think 0.9% is probably more relevant for most of us where there's no outbreak around us, or even there's like a minor outbreak, we can be treated. So keep that in mind. The real death rate is around 0.9%. However, if there's a situation where it's a massive outbreak where the people cannot have access to the hospital, you're in places where the medical condition is really poor, the death rate could be 5 to 6 times higher than 0.9%. The second thing I want to point out is that even for the 0.9%, it's not the same across the board. In middle of February, China published a study which shows the death rate caused by all sorts of things, caused by age, caused by medical condition, caused by gender, caused by occupation. There are two things that are interesting. Let me show you this table. So first table shows you the death rate by age group. And over here, because they measure death rate in a different definition, so I converted that into for different age group, what is the death rate comparing to the average death rate? So as you can see, for the age group all the way up to 40 to 49, we're seeing a death rate it's under 20% of the average. If we believe that 0.9% is the average, so those death rate will convert to somewhere between 0.1% death rate and 0.2%, which is very, very low. But as age goes to 50 to 59, to 60 to 69, the actual observed death rate is it start to get really higher than average. If we believe the overall death rate is about 0.9%, and again 0.9% for the places where there's no outbreak, you will be seeing the death rate start to creep up above 1%, and for age 80 plus, it will be quite high, 6.77%. Now the question is, how do those death rates compare to flu? So what I did was I went to the CDC website. I look at the data from 2018 to 19, the winter of 2018 to 19. I look at the flu. What's the death rate for the flu? And what I used was the number of deaths divided by number of people who are infected and made a visit to any medical facility. I think this is probably the best apples to apples comparison to the coronavirus data. For age under 49, the flu death rate is about 0.06%. It's very low. Then you compare that to coronavirus, we're seeing somewhere between 0.1 to 0.2%. It's also very low. It's about 2 to 3 times of the flu. So it is higher, but not massively higher. For age 50 to 64, we're seeing 0.14%. On the coronavirus side, we're seeing somewhere between 0.5 to 1.4%. So now we're talking about for higher age, we're talking about the death rate 5 to 10 times higher. Then lastly, for flu, for age 65 plus, the death rate is 1.5%. On the coronavirus side, we see the data, it's more like 3%, 6.7%. So it's also like the multiples of 1.5%. I think the conclusion I would draw here is that if for people whose age are young, you're really looking at a pretty low death rate, and it's just marginally higher than the death rate of a flu. But for people who are older, not only you're looking at pretty high death rate, it's much more higher than the flu. So that's a group that need to be more careful. From the same study, they also show the death rate for the people who have versus not have pre-existing medical condition. No surprise, for the people who without medical condition, pre-existing medical condition, the death rate is quite low. It's about 40% of the average, which will translate into about 0.3 to 0.4 death rate. And for the people who have it, it's 300, 400, 500, depending on what condition it is, of the average, which will translate into almost close to 5% of the death rate. That is quite high. And all of them make sense because when you get infected by a virus, you pretty rely on your immune system to fight against the virus. And if you're healthy, if your immune system is strong, you'll be okay. So to conclude, I think that the coronavirus death rate on surface is quite high. It's approaching 5%, which is probably at least 10 times as high, 10 to 20 times as high as the flu death rate. But if you look at the places where there's no outbreak, it's less than 1%. And if you double click into that, you'll see that for people who are younger and healthier, this is probably no more than a bad flu. So that you probably don't need to panic. But for the people who are not as healthy, either because of you're older or you have pre-existing medical condition, coronavirus can be quite deadly. So we probably need to be very cautious.